Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Oh, wait, no, that's the wrong screen. Ah! This is what happens. This is what happens when I take over a week off. I just forget how to stream. Hello. This is Brian here, Smith, live from the Forbidden Library. I'm back from an extended holiday. I originally only took because I had to travel for work. I'm allowed out of the Forbidden Library if it's work related, apparently. So I took a week off because I didn't want to have to, I would have been tired and it wouldn't have been fun. And then, the Sunday of my week off, guess what? COVID finally catches up to me. I've avoided it. I've avoided it for so long, and it's finally caught me. I'm still a little bit sniffly today and still coughing a little bit, but I could not do this stream. This is a very important stream. I dragged this table and chairs to a much spookier part of the library. I found these two little bat friends, artist in the description, and we're gonna have a heck of a good time with some short stories that are spooky. I couldn't have Spooky Month disappear without a spooky Sunday. It would be against the law. It would be a crime. And I do not want to commit any crimes. Oh, but yeah, that's been me. Hi. So for this stream, I've got 3 short stories by myself. And I also have the royalty-free page of the Creepypasta website, which has such bangers as The Statement of a Randolph Carter by H.P. Lovecraft. What's the one I really want to read? Let me just show you. Yeah, so this is where we've got some stories we can read. And these short stories count against my book count, which is why I had to make sure I added it onto this scene. I want to read Monkey's Paw by W.W. Jacobs because who doesn't want to read about the monkey paw stories where the wishes go wrong? It's great. I also love that it has minutes of reading time on this, which makes me happy. You can't see my cursor. And you're not going to. That's fine. Oh, wait, you can! Yay! Minutes of reading time. So that's great. We can sort of read and plan what's going on, which is very useful. But we're not doing those ones just yet. We are doing... So what do we fancy first? I've got 3. We've got Depths of the Dungeon, which is the spooky stuff at the bottom of an RPG dungeon, not being quite what the adventurers expect. We've got Small Town Draxville, which is about a vampire hunter. And we've got Not a Hacker, which is about a sort of cyberpunk-esque town, and you've got this grizzled old detective wants to know what happened to his daughter. Now the first one I can find is Small Town Draxville, so I'm gonna grab that. Let's read this. Boom. Words. I should have spell checked this. This is embarrassing. 1 second. See, some of these have been on Patreon, so I expected better of myself than some of the... there's gotta be a better version of this somewhere. Did I... I know what I did. I must have spell checked it. Put it on Patreon, the spell checked version, and then not put the spell checked one back on here. Let's quickly do a little quick edit here. The fastest edit in the land. What the hell is spell checking word? See more. It's in a side view with the edit. Fuck it. The spookiest thing in the world. Spell check. Boosted. It's none of those. It's boasted. Boasted. Fuck you. Oh, okay, we're gonna edit as we go. Small Town Draxville was a peaceful town, and I need to do the currently reading. Currently reading badly edited small town. Yeah. Town. Draxville. Oh, drop my glasses. Yeah. So, yeah, now you know, now you can see how this is kind of what my first drafts look like, and you should never see the first draft of someone's writing. So this is a sneak peek for everyone, I guess. I kind of wanted to show the people that inspired this story this, and I don't think I can anymore. Anyway, small town Draxville was a peaceful town. It was a modest farming town nestled in nestled by a forest in the valley. It boasted picturesque views. Picturesque views and wonderful nature walks, but it was a bit out of the way for the average traveller. The amount of visitors were enough to keep one B&B open and a restaurant or two. But all is not what it seems, Alexander Helsing knew. He had caught sight of one in the closest city. They mingled with the locals, and he saved a poor man who he had taken home to eat that night. The vampire had fled. Not field, but fled. How do I spell fled? Fled! But Halen? Oh yeah, I remember. I got confused between Van Halen and Van Helsing. This is going well. But Helsing managed to get some of its bloody clothing. After that, all it took was to get his bloodhound to follow the scent. It took him to the train station, and then to a train, and then a bus, and then another train, finally bringing him to Draxville. A name so obvious he pretty much ruled it out as some serious vampire hiding spot. Was it a genius ploy to hide in plain sight, or was it a really stupid vampire named the town a long time ago? Either way, by the time he got there, it was mid-afternoon. He was tired after chasing the vampire all the way through the night, so he went to the B&B. The place was quaint. Sorry. As I said, still a little snuffly, but we're getting there. I'm gonna do myself a favour. Oh, 1 second. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. You're the person who did the bat. Thank you for my cute bat friends. They are adorable. That was the artist, guys. Go check them out. Links are in the description for the record. Yeah. Well. The place was quaint. The same decoration you would expect a grandmother's house, and an amount of smell to boot. Helsing stopped in his way. Signature scowl, but at the delicate feeling of the decor, he felt like he needed to brighten his expression a tad. Well, I hope you get some good deals at the grocery store. More so when the young lady filling in paperwork at the desk looked up and smiled at him. How badly empty. I'm so embarrassed. I should have checked this. So most of mine are probably going to look like this. How did they even? Anyway. We're good. Welcome, sir, she called. The bloodhound padded beside him, almost grinning with his tongue hanging from his lips. Aw, he's cute, the girl complimented, and the dog wagged his tail at the attention. Don't tell him too much. It'll go to his head. Helsing joked. The girl laughed. What can I do for you, sir? Do you have a room? He asked. I think so. 1 second. She nodded, then shifted the papers on her desk to unearth her visitor book. Yes, she exclaimed, running her fingers across a line. There's one on the ground floor here. Pet friendly. Splendid. I'll take that. Helsing nodded. Good sir. May I take your name and how many nights you plan to stay? She asked. Shuffling a few more papers for a pen and giving him a dramatic click. Alexander Helsing. Just 1 night. He answered. The young woman paused a moment, then continued writing. Helsing. Like the vampire hunters? She asked with a giggle. We do get your type around with a name like Draxville. Yeah, Helsing watched curiously. Any truth to that name? Oh, not that I know of. Maybe it was just some big joke or something. The woman shrugged. Any truth to your name? Some. Helsing nodded. You don't have to worry about it. I see. She looked concerned for a moment, but quickly smiled. Well, in the best possible way, I hope you come empty-handed. Your room number is 2. My name is Lindsay. Please don't hesitate to find me if you need anything. Thank you, Lindsay. Else. Did I do that? Yes. Helsing gave her a polite nod before he and his hound. He didn't hit the hound. For he and his hound went to his room. Helsing rested for the day, then woke up around evening to make sure he had something to eat. Lindsay was kind enough to say that the house would provide some dog food for his beloved hound, and directed Helsing to one of the local restaurants for dinner. It was a wonderful fish-based place. The vegetables served were all locally grown. Helsing could say he had a wonderful meal. He thanked the staff as he got up to leave, but as soon as he stood, his world felt like liquid, and reality slipped through his fingers. Poof. He hit the ground. When he next awoke, he smelled the mild smell of old person. He felt the oily, soft bed beneath him, and I don't even know. And a lumpy white roof above him. Oh, good. You're awake, came a familiar voice. He wasn't restrained, but for some reason, Helsing's muscles didn't respond. He just about managed to move his eyes to the voice and saw Lindsay stood up so she could see him better. What? He mumbled, seeing if he could see someone else. He spotted 2 more by the door, waiters from the restaurant he went to. I'm sorry, Mr. Helsing. I don't like to have to do this. But when a hunter like you comes around, we find this is the best way to deal with them, she sighed. A hunter? Yes, the bloodhound and name gave it away. At the mention of his hound, Helsing started. Well, your cute boy is just fine. Just asleep. She reassured him, but at this point he wasn't sure what to believe. He glared at her with what minimal strength he had. You, however, are poisoned, and it will kill you in the next half an hour if you don't take the antidote. We have the antidote, and we'll give it to you if you give it to you if you promise to leave this town and never come back. She told him, her bright smile gone for an angered look of seriousness. She wasn't a vampire. That much Helsing knew for certain. His hound didn't react to her. He could feel an aura of blood and ash from her, like he didn't feel an aura of blood. That should be couldn't. He couldn't feel an aura of blood and ash from her like he did the others. He hadn't felt that from anyone he'd met in this town so far. So what? Are they your masters? Are you thralls? Nothing of the sort. The vampires live out of town. I'm so mad at myself for not editing this. The vampires live in our town, are careful around us. They don't even realise we know about them. However, we do. And we know they have protected our town for generations. Hell, they even make a point to going out of town to feed, so we are happy to keep them safe in return, Lindsay explained. So you should know, if you leave and try to come back, the whole town will be on watch for you. And our methods will get worse the more you attempt to harm them. A chill ran through Helsing's spine at the look of nonchalance she gave him. Honestly, he had seen vampires more scary than this woman making that claim. Lethal poison is your nicest method? He questioned. No, but it's the one that works the most. And he could see why. If they had him paralysed, a timer on his life without a weapons or means of defending himself. And his dog. They had his dog. We don't want to hurt either of you, she added, frowning. He sighed. Fine. Helsing took the antidote, waited for it to kick in and get his strength back before leaving that day. At the very least, Lindsay did not charge him for the room, nor did the restaurant for his food. However, every person he passed in town made a point of watching him as he went to the train station. There was no way to get away. Never a moment he could change the situation without hurting innocence. Misguided innocence, but innocence. And that was why Helsing was in the business to begin with. If he was going to get any vampire from Draxville, it clearly wasn't going to be on their home turf. Hey, Lindsay! The door to the B&B opened, and Lindsay looked up and smiled at the pale man that walked in. Alucard, handsome as ever! She greeted with a little wink. Oh, you stop that, he waved her off. You're far too young for me. Oh, you keep saying this, yet you still look 25. He pointed a playful accusatory finger at him. She pointed it, not he. He chuckled, awkward. Anyway, Lindsay, I need a bit of a favour. What can I do for you? She asked. You had a guy called Helsing stay here before? He asked cautiously. Helsing? Lindsay frowned in thought. She shuffled the pages at her desk before unearthing her visitor book. There was a large blacked out line on the pages she scanned through. Nope, no one by that name, she reported. Alucard's shoulders slumped with relief. Oh good. Lindsay chuckled. You get into some trouble on your big city business trip, she eyed him. Something like that, he shrugged. Well, be more careful. Tell that whole family of yours to be careful, okay? She wagged an authoritative finger at him. Yes, Sergeant, we will be much more careful with our dealings in the future. Yay! So other than my absolutely freaking terrible editing, it was written with love, and we did say to Fort that when they're written with love, I get to do this. Oh no! It's behind the thing. There we go. Up. Up. Yeah! Book complete! It counts, even if it's terribly edited. It doesn't say it had to be a good book. But anyway, Small Town Draxville was based off some banter from a not small channel called RKG during the Chalice Dungeon trials. They were Chalice Dungeon retry series, yes. They started talking about Twilight and the baseball game they do in the Thunder and stuff, and how it's very silly that they do that. And the whole town might actually just be aware of them because they keep away the bad. They don't feed off people, and they keep away bad vampires and stuff. So they coined this idea that maybe the town actually would like to protect them, and this is where Small Town Draxville was born. So thank you, boys. Sorry that I couldn't read that without all these issues coming up. Maybe we'll have some better luck with the next story. And I should do better. Yes, bad me. Bonk. Editing bonk. So what was my other things? So, Depths of the Dungeon or Not a Hacker. Which one do I find first? That's how I'm gonna decide. Let's get that out of here though. Don't need that anymore. I don't think either of these are gonna be well edited. Oh wait. I might know. Grandma might not have a good version either. But there's a chance. Where there's a will, there's a way. Logging in. Nope, it is not in Patreon. Oh, well. Okay, so we're looking for... Found Depths of the Dungeon first. This one got a little creepy just right at the end. Ooh, look at that. We already have Nick. Yes, this one is well edited. We're also going to make that text a wee bit bigger, I think. Let's space it out a little. Make it a bit bigger. Yeah, that's nice. That's all big. We like that. Depths of the Dungeon. Currently reading. I'll actually put my name on this one because I feel like I've earned it. Dungeon by Brianny Rose. Nope. Wait. Let me just put by me. Yay! This one should go a little bit smoother. Then we just take a small drink. I might re-record. Small Town Draxville at some point. With like better reading, better editing, etc. I am genuinely embarrassed about that. However, here we go with Depths of the Dungeon. Spooky short story 2. Let's go. It had been millennia since the dungeon appeared. An abyss full of monsters and treasure, spiraling floor after floor into the earth. Adventurers from far and wide tried their hand at plundering its depths. Prizes of riches and fame excited, greedy, and prideful souls alike. The best of those adventurers was Sophia Giano, an adventurer gifted like no other. Sophia's unparalleled drive to see the furthest depths of the dungeon saw her bringing back riches that set her family up for generations and fame surpassing any noble or royalty. She brought back trophies proving her descent to the 99th floor, and left once again to conquer even more. Only she never returned. Most assumed the death of the legend. Surely the hubris of her solo adventuring had seen her to... Wow. Sorry. Snuffles. Most assumed the death of a legend. Surely the hubris of her solo adventuring had seen her to her end. But her brother, Wyatt Giano, didn't believe it. His sister was near invincible. He knew that for certain. But, 1 second, let me just mute. Gross noises, whoop whoop. Not because he knew her skill, not because of her experience adventuring, no. He and his parents held her secret. Sophia was like no adventurer that had ever come before her. Wyatt had watched her fallen from a tree as a child, be trampled by farm animals and mauled by wolves. Every time she had been unharmed. Only the sharpest of blades could pierce her skin. Great heights did nothing to her flesh and bones. Sophia had been blessed at birth. Being the younger of the two, he wasn't there, but his parents told him stories of the beautiful otherworldly being that had descended upon them the night of Sophia's birth and promised a strong and successful daughter. Sophia had not disappointed. The money she had brought back had their parents set for life. Wyatt never had to worry about her. Until now. With the money she had earned and the renown, Wyatt managed to get himself onto the most powerful adventuring party out there. 3 made up the party. 1 was the son of the blacksmith's guild, his armour so tough that it could block the swing of the strongest monsters. 1 was the archmage of the guild, spells so powerful they would eviscerate armies, and the last was a royal knight whose holy blade was the bane of evil. Wyatt was not so skilled. He had not gone into adventuring with his sister. However, he had been there to hear all her stories and document what he could, so her tales would never be untold. He had not released those stories as of yet, so no one who wasn't missing knew about the dungeon's depths more than he. With the might of these 3 great warriors and Wyatt's knowledge, they made it all the way, down, 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 through the icy caverns and lava rivers, through dirt and diamonds covered in sweat and blood. They trudged through 99 floors. Floor 99 itself was strange. All the other floors had been natural in some sense. Whether it was some strange underground forest or a cold and icy cavern or burning with a lava's warmth, none had looked like this, with bleached white walls and the floor was tiled with pale blue. Their footsteps gave a strange echo in the empty, thin hallways, strips of light above them. What kind of magic power these? The Archmage could only muse, as the scene made their blood run cold. It was just so different in comparison to what they knew. Even the air down here smelled strangely sharp. On the wall there were signs, but the script was too old and too strange even for the Archmage's spells to be able to translate. They were yellow and black. Some seemed to have triangles with markings inside. On the edge, they carried on, but there were no monsters. Not a hoof of a minotaur, nor the stench of a goblin. Just a corridor. The party passed the old, thin-looking blue door with no might or magic. But no might nor magic could get them to open. So they had no choice but to continue. Ooh, some bad editing there. Well done, me. Eventually, the eerie corridor of silence came to an end at a large black door, which was at least familiar enough to be a door to the next floor, even if it was much smaller than the others they had come across so far. "Did your sister ever mention this place?" asked the Royal Knight. No, Wyatt answered unsurely. She brought back a trophy. She brought back a trophy, didn't she? Where'd she even get that from this level? I believe I saw it. I saw where she would have gotten it, on the 98th floor, the Archmage answered. No one else has been this far to check before, so I suppose she just grabbed something on the way out. Either way, we must press on. The knight stepped forward, courageous as ever. The party descended onto the 100th floor. The staircase landed on a large and open room with blue tiles spread out. 4 pillars reached up to the low ceiling, and on the other end of the room was 3 people. At first glance, they looked like normal humans, but something about their auras, their presence made every one of them put their guard up. 2 were dressed in a blue uniform in front of a barred wall. The 3rd was sitting behind a desk. The deskman's strange golden eyes looked up at their arrival. None of the adventuring party could bring themselves to even take a single step. Everything in their blood told them that if these creatures attacked, there would be nothing left of them. The man-looking thing at the desks stood. He straightened the black tie of his black suit as he stepped around the desk and approached them. Congratulations on coming this far, mortals. I have to admit, I didn't think we would see any of you down here. I will have to up the security of the higher levels. He clapped. The armourer, the archmage, and the knight flinched at the sound, but Wyatt tensed. He managed to find his moment and pushed to the front of the group. Where's my sister? He tried to yell, demand answers, but it came out like a meek request. Sister, the man-like thing questioned. You can relax. We have no qualms. Sorry. We have no qualms with you mortals, but my throat has qualms with being parched right now. The Archmage managed to calm somewhat those words, even taking it as an invitation to speak, talking over Wyatt, who tried to ask about his sister. What is this place? What is this place? Is that the voice I was using? I don't know. Your people call this place a dungeon, did you not? Do you not think that, as the name suggests, that this is a place where prisoners were being held? Behind this wall are powerful beings and dark gods that would destroy and consume not only your world, but others should they escape. And it is my job to keep them here. The being gestured to the barred wall. As a reward for besting my security and showing me where I need to improve, I will reward you all handsomely, whatever money, knowledge, or boon you wish. However, you will also leave with a curse that will kill you should you speak of what lies here. The party looked between each other. The knight, the armourer, and the archmage were starting to smile. All they wanted was the bragging rights of being the ones who saved the legendary adventurer, but now an even greater reward lay before them. Wyatt, however, no! I came here for my sister. What did you do to her? The being's eyes focused on him, and Wyatt stiffened. It took a few moments before finally speaking. Sister... Ah, I see. He frowned. Unfortunately, she has been touched by one of my inmates. A mistake by us that a part of their influence managed to escape. She was naught but a tool they used to try escape. She has been incarcerated. Wyatt stared. No. He shook his head. No, that can't. But then, all her life, Sophia had wanted nothing more than to get into the dungeon and see the lowest point. Wyatt had asked her why. She wanted to so many times. Her powers could be used in other places, but all she wanted was to get to the bottom of the dungeon. Maybe she was so driven sometimes. She was so driven sometimes Wyatt had thought her possessed. Maybe she had been. Then it's not her fault. You should let her go. He tried to order the godly being. I am sorry for what happened, but she is rather powerful. She was hard enough to subdue in the first place, and I risk letting others out, opening the door for her. You may ask me for anything else, but I cannot bring you your sister. The godly being answered, a fake sympathy in its voice. Wyatt heard the rest of the party behind him, whispering and muttering about what they could ask of this being as their reward. Then, can I at least see her? Can that be my reward? He requested. The godly being considered this. In the meantime, his party made their requests. The Archmage asked for immortality to forever study magic. The Armourer asked for a mine under his home that would never run out of precious metals. The Knight asked for a bright future for his princely charge. After granting all of these requests, the being turned to Wyatt once more. All right, he answered, but it will not be for long. Come with me. He turned away. Wyatt gave a glance to his party, who smiled to assure him that they would wait for him. One of the beings in blue opened the barred door and led him in through. It darkened. In darkened shadows, Wyatt saw a line of screens. The being stood by one of them and gestured for Wyatt to watch it. When Wyatt focused on it, the screen lit up. It was blinding for a few moments, before pictures started to fade in. Colours and spectrums his eyes had never perceived before were visible in the strange abyss the screen showed. None of that mattered when he saw her floating there. "Sophia!" he called. He went to touch the screen, but the command from the being in a suit stopped him. "Do not touch." The floating form blinked. "Wyatt?" came a mumble. "Came to save you, sis. I did, but then save me." Her weak voice came through. She turned in the air and floated towards the screen. "Please, Wyatt." She reached out for him, and Wyatt couldn't stop himself. He reached back. His fingers touched the screen. Then it shut off, and his sister was gone. However, they had to keep up appearances. They forced their face to look longingly at the screen. Brought both hands to it. "I told you not to touch. However, the boon is complete. Follow me." The warden didn't suspect a thing. They left with the rest of the party, succeeding in their escape. Despite her own failed attempt at carrying out their will, the girl had been useful in the end, it seemed. The vessel was young, and it moved nicely. As thanks for the sacrifice of both brother and sister, they would be sure their family dies last when the world burned. The end! I don't know how this one comes across as a reader, but I know writing it, I gave myself the heebie-jeebies with the ending there, because I got really into the brain of this eldritch being that just took over this child. And it was just like, haha, this child is dead, it's mine now, I'm now walking a corpse. It was, yeah. But also, wait a minute. Why did no one tell me that I put the number up instead of down? I just nearly made things harder for myself. Thought wouldn't mind. Thought would be like la 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 in the background, controlling me. Anyway. Da 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 da. So depths of the dungeon. I can't even remember where this came from in my imagination. Probably Danmachi. Because Danmachi has such a really cool mystery around its dungeon and what its dungeon is. It is a whole being in itself. So I guess I was sitting there with that, and then I was thinking of the word dungeon. I was like, what if it is actually a dungeon? What if there is something being imprisoned in there? Which I know isn't the most original thought. You got Arifureta and other things, but I was just thinking what scary things would be under the dungeon, and this is what came out of that. That is how Depths of the Dungeon was born. And we have one more short story by me, which was, what was the ones we got left? Not a Hacker! Not a Hacker. This one was fairly recent. This should be fairly well edited, I believe. Should we look? Yeah! Okay, so it was just the one. It was just the one story for some reason I just hadn't edited. I don't know how that happened. Spacing, please. Spacing. Like 18. 18. Looks good, looks good. Not a hacker. Oh. Drop my glasses again. Interchange this. Da, 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 da. Not a hacker. I can't use capital letters because hotkey's broke. Okay. Oh, I remember the inspiration for this. Yeah, I will discuss that at the end, like I have for the others. Oh, I can also take my number down because. Not that. Okay. Yeah. Not a hacker. She was so still. The mortician had done their job too well. Lucy looked like she was sleeping. The uniform to the school she'd been enjoying her first few days at pristine. The bed of white that lined the coffin, looking so comfortable. Detective Justin Garrix had stared at her with empty eyes. What was left in the world for him when his little girl was asleep forever? He cried, he'd yelled, but as they carried her body away to donate for scientific use, he had nothing left. He'd been given time off, but all that led him to do was drink and watch TV. The AI-generated programs were wild, unpredictable dramas and fantasies that he was barely listening to. When the news popped up, one of the few shows with real people still on the air, for some reason people clung to the idea that their important information came from the lips of real people, regardless of whether they could tell the difference nowadays. The story was played. A 14-year-old girl was stabbed to death on the way home from school. The police have given a statement that they have a suspect. Garrick sat up at that, taking in every detail he could about the sketch they showed. After managing to get away from the police, he was caught on security footage in the very lab the young girl's body had been taken to. A witness to the scene had confirmed that it is the same man. 1 second. Back. Garrick's teeth gritted so hard his jaw clicked. He'd get the bastard. He couldn't just take her life. He had to invade where her body was going to be used for the greater good. Garrick's. I think it's supposed to be through. Garrick threw his whiskey down his throat, adding fuel to the fire that consumed him, before he finally got off his sofa for what felt like the first time in weeks. He showered, got changed, grabbed his duster, and set off into the night. Because only cool detectives and stuff have dusters. Doll City was just that. A city of fakes. Flickering holograms filled the streets. They stood outside of shops, smiling and greeting. They stood at self-service cash registers. They sat in the driver's seat of self-driving cars and buses, a strange, fake face to the machines that really did everything. They were powered by the same AI of the TV shows that Garrick's had been watching. It was powerful enough that it could hold a conversation. One even looked a little disappointed when Garrick ignored his attempts to greet him and invite him into the brightly lit takeaway. The streets darkened significantly when he turned into an alley. No need for so much in a residential area. The holograms were gone. There were just flats packed one after the other, seemed to reach the sky. Ladder-like platforms in front of each one, with gentler street lights illuminating each door. Garrick stood on the platform and pressed the button. It raised him to the third apartment up, where he pressed the doorbell. "I'm sorry, the resident is asleep," came a robotic voice. Is this an emergency? Yes. Garrick's told it flatly. Very well. The robot confirmed after some bumps from inside, and a more human voice came through the speaker. Detective Garrick's? The male voice sounded sleepy. Martin? Why are you at my house at 2 a.m? Martin asks, sounding reasonably annoyed. I saw the news. There was a pause on the other end, before a long groan and a come in. The door before Garrus beeped and he entered. Despite having its entrance down a dingy alley, the inside of the apartment was spacious and clean. The smooth furniture looked grey in the low blue light of the city that settled in from the window. Martin shuffled into the light from further in, nothing but a scrawny mess in his underpants, socks, and an open dressing gown. He waddled on over to the kitchenette and grabbed the coffee maker. I'd offer you a coffee, but I really don't want you to. He grumbled. I need your help. Garrick's ignored his jokes. Martin yawned, pouring the heavenly bitter black liquid into a cup covered in corporate logos before turning to Garrick's. You want to find the guy who killed your daughter, he surmised. And I know with your abilities you can find the guy faster than anyone, so help me, Garrick's growled. Martin sniggered into his cup. You know, I was supposed to start looking officially tomorrow. Well, I guess later today? For some reason, they think you're gonna go all vigilante on them. I don't know where they got that idea. Garrick shrugged. Now, are you going to help me or not? Martin sighed. I tried to think what you will do if I don't. He downs the coffee. Give me a few minutes to get changed. Move fast, psychic consultant. True to his word, Martin and Garrick's were out on the street not long after. Let's see what I can get! Martin flexed his fingers before going over to the nearest hologram. Martin ignored the same hologram that greeted him in a familiar tone and slipped his hand into the image of the hologram. Martin, sir, please, that's rude! The hologram protested. Pixels distorted and buzzed as a corporeal object collided with the incorporeal. Oh, I think there's going to be some gross noises again from my nose. Bye-bye! Garrick sighed. He did this song and dance every time. The psychic consultant of Doll City Police Force, said to see the footsteps of the past as long as they were witnessed by a hologram. I have something, Martin told him, opening his eyes to reveal nothing but white. It sent shivers up Garrick's spine when he did that. God, you wish he would just admit to being a really good hacker already and give up on the theatrics. Yeesh. I'm kind of annoyed. He's so close to my house in the first place. I know it isn't the best part of town, but still. Focus! Garrick snapped. Right. This hologram saw him walk down the street and Martin pulled his hand back out. The hologram shivered and his eyes turned back to normal. Martin looked down the street and pointed to a rather dark building. There! Then let's go. The building looked abandoned from the outside. Not too strange for this part of town to have an empty shop front or two. The door at the front had not been secured, and the two simply pushed it out of the way and started to look around the dark, abandoned shop front. Coat hangers and metal rods were scattered all over the place. At first glance, it looked like any old former clothing shop. Anything of value was gone. Martin looked around with a frown, his torch swinging left and right, as Garrick's took a more methodical approach. First looking at the entrance and the exits. One was a fire escape into their alley next door. There was a breeze letting it swing eerily on its brushed hinges. Another door took his interest. "Martin," he whispered, and directed his attention back to the door. He had to hop over the counter, but it was clearly a door to the stockroom. However, given that the rest of the shop was in such disrepair, its fully functioning electronic lock was suspicious. "Can you do anything about this?" He gestured, and Martin just stared blankly. "What can I do with that?" he asked. Garrick rolled his eyes. "Hack it!" Martin narrowed his eyes. "I'm not a hacker, dumbass." Garrick sighed. "Fine. I guess we'll do it my way then. Go keep an eye on the alley from the fire escape," he ordered, and reluctantly, Martin did as told. Once he was in place, Garrick unholstered his gun and banged loudly on the locked door. "Police! Open up! We have you surrounded, so don't try anything!" he barked loud and clear. Martin tensed back to him with a glare. Garrick glared back, cocking his head to remind him of his job. The bluff seemed to work, though. There was a smash, and then Martin yelled, "I see him!" and started running. "Don't let him out of your sight!" Garrick yelled before running after. The perp led them down a few winding roads until they came to the main road. "Did you see which way he went?" "No, but..." Martin pointed to a nearby hologram that stiffened and pointed to their left. "Down that alley," it told them. "Thank you." Martin nodded to it, then ran off. Garrick didn't question it, and quickly overtook Martin charging down the alley. The perp was attempting to climb a fence to get away. Garrick skidded to a halt and aimed his gun. "This is for my daughter, you bastard!" he screamed. "Detective Garrick's, wait!" But Martin couldn't even get his sentence out. Bang! Bang! The gunshots burst with light and sound, hitting their mark with perfect precision. One to the head and one to the heart. Garrick glared at the body as it fell from the fence, something else falling in with it. The box the perp had been carrying bounced on the floor, a thud of heavy machinery. "And what were you trying to get away with?" Martin swanned over and snatched it up. He looked at it, then his face dropped. Garrick's managed to peel his eyes away from the body, his breathing heavy and hands shaking after the deed had been done. "What is it?" he asked. Martin brightened his expression before turning his face to Garrick's. "Oh, some stolen tech or something," he shrugged. "I'll keep a hold of it and call this in. You can go if you want." "What kind of tech?" Garrick stormed up to him and stole it from his hands. Detective, I don't think..." "This is a hologram box." He looked over it. He'd seen plenty of these before. "He killed my little girl. Over this." He found the on switch, determined to find the answers to why his little girl was killed. The box buzzed to life. The blue-eye projector brightened, and a small projection appeared, no bigger than his hand. He nearly dropped the projector, but quickly stopped himself. He'd never drop her. The little girl stared up at him with tear-stained eyes. His little girl. "Lucy," he whispered. Dad, I don't know what's going on. Why are you so big? What's happening? Daddy!" The girl got progressively more panicked and stressed until Martin came over and pressed the off switch on the box. "What was that?" Garrick's dark eyes were filled now, and Martin tensed in the void of anger. You donated her body to science, I take it? He took a few steps back. Her body, Garrick's answered. Her body, he roared. Did you know it takes a good month for the soul to leave the body? Martin winced as he told him. Garrick stared, not really able to process the meaning behind those words. I'm not a spirit. I'm a spirit medium, by the way. Not a hacker. The end. This one had such a freaking cool world in it. Like, this idea that all these AIs people think of are actually just people's fucking dead souls. Ah. And you'll never guess where this one actually came from, plot-wise. Let me just do the thing. Do, 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 do. Plot-wise, the idea for this came from Digimon. Digimon Ghost Game. An anime I never actually finished, but it started off... It has a genuinely very cool premise of Digimon coming through via holograms and things like that in this quite high-tech society. It's very cool, honestly. I just didn't quite get into it, unfortunately. And it snowballed into this idea of oh, they donated their body to science. So with the body came the soul. So they used the soul for science. For science, bro! And that is the crux of Not a Hacker. Good old Martin, the spirit medium. And that's it. That's it for my short stories. That was a good hour. I'm glad they lasted that long. Like I said, I might redo one of them as a thing. And we've done over 5 books for 4 as well, which is nice. I think I'm gonna take a small break because I'm snuffling. I'm gonna go get some tissues and stuff. Yay! And then after that, we will go on to boop. I got a spare. We don't need that anymore. Boop. We'll be going on to spooky stories from the internet. The public domain part of the creepypasta website. See you in a bit. pretend. I pretend. I have tissues. And we have old school creepypasta. Tasty pasta. Tasty pasta. Yeah, so I don't know many creepypastas, so it's trying to find them, read them and stuff. And get permissions for them. Well, there is a public domain, which doesn't need permissions, so we're good. The one I would like to read the most, as I said at the start, is Monkey's Paw by W. Jacobs. I like a bit of wishing gone wrong. Let's see how they go. Let's see if anything I wrote captures the feeling of classic creepypasta. Let's see if I can zoom in a little. Nope, that's the best we're doing. And then it does that. Let me do some editing magical edits right now. To try and make sure that we got. No, that's not what I want. What I want is to do this. No. This. Ah! There it is. So if we do this. I want to make it a bit bigger for you. There we go. The following is a classic horror story presently in the public domain. Its author is deceased. Please consider the time period. Yes, as we had issues with before. If it gets too bad, I will quit out, just like I did with good old Tom Swift. But currently, I think we should be okay. It's horror. It's supposed to be a little silly, and I'd like to think that if it made it onto the creepypasta, then it's been somewhat vetted. Because they don't have that many public domain horrors on there, which surprises me because there's quite a lot. But anyway, here we go. Without, the night was cold and wet, but in the small parlour of Laburnum Villa, the blinds were drawn and the fire burned brightly. Father and son were at chess. The former, who possessed ideas about the game involving radical changes, put his king into such sharp and unnecessary perils that it even provoked comment from the white-haired old lady knitting by the fire. "Hark the wind! Hark the wind!" said Mr. White, who had seen a fatal mistake after it was too late. Was amiably disastrous of preventing his son from seeing it. "I'm listening," said the latter, grimly surveying the board as he stretched out his hand. "Check." "I should hardly think he'd come tonight," said his father with his hand poised over the board. "Mate," replied his son. "That's the worst of living so far out," bawled Mr. White, with sudden and onlook of violence. "Of all the beastly, slushy, out-of-the-way places to live in, this is the worst. Pathways are bog, the roads a torrent, and I don't know what people are thinking about. I suppose it's only two houses in the road are let. They think it doesn't matter." Sorry, let me just mute a minute again. Blab, 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 blab. "Never mind, dear," said his wife soothingly. "Perhaps you'll win the next one." Mr. White looked up. So he's lost chess and he's blaming his geography. It's because I live in the middle of nowhere that I cannot win at chess. Her der der. Mr. White, you are very strange. Maybe this is a product of the times. Did olden days think that they were better at chess if they lived in places with lots of people? Mr. White looked up sharply, just to intercept a knowing glance between mother and son. The words died away on his lips, and he hid a guilty grin in his thin grey beard. There he is, said Herbert White as the gate banged loudly and heavy footsteps came to the door. The old man rose with hospitable haste and opened the door. Opening the door was heard condoling with the new arrival. The new arrival also condoled with himself, so that Mrs. White said, "Tut, tut," and coughed gently as her husband entered the room, followed by a tall, burly man, beardy of eye and rotund. I think it means that. Of visage. Oh, ye oldie words make a tongue go blep blep. Sergeant Major Morris, he said, introducing himself. The Sergeant Major shook hands, and taking the preferred seat by the fire, watched contentedly while his host got out whiskey and tumblers and stood a small copper kettle on the fire. Ooh, tea and whiskey. Very nice. At the third glass, his eyes got brighter, and he began to talk. The little family circle regarding with eager interest this visitor from distant parts, as he squared his broad shoulders in the chair and spoke of wild scenes and dowry deeds, of wars and plagues and strange peoples. 21 years of it, said Mr. White, nodding at his wife and son. And when he went away, he was a slip of a youth in the warehouse. Now look at him. He don't look to have taken much harm, said Mrs. White politely. I'd like to go to India myself, said the old man, just to look around a bit, you know. Better where you are, said the Sergeant Major, shaking his head. He put down the empty glass and, sighing softly, shook it again. I should like to see the old temples and fakirs and jugglers, said the old man. A minute, say. Just rearranging some shoes. I should like to see the temples, the fakirs, the jugglers. What was that you started telling me the other day? About the monkey's paw or something? Nothing. Said the soldier hastily. Leastways, nothing worth hearing. Monkey's paw? Said Mrs. White, curiously. Well, it's a bit of what you might call magic, perhaps, said the Sergeant Major offhandedly. His three listeners leaned forward eagerly. The visitor absent-mindedly put his empty glass to his lips, then set it down again. His host filled it for him. Look at it, said the Sergeant Major, fumbling in his pocket. It's just an ordinary little paw, dried to a mummy. He took something out of his pocket and proffered it. Mrs. White drew back with a grimace, but her son, taking it, examined it curiously. And what's so special about it? inquired Mr. White, as he took it from his son, having examined it and placed it upon the table. It had a spell put on it by an old faker. I imagine faker's probably not a nice word anymore. I feel like that's like witch doctor or something like that. I am not sure of the cultural significance, said the Sergeant Major, a very holy man. He wanted to show that fate ruled people's lives, and that those who interfered with it did so to their sorrow. He put a spell on it, so that the three separate men could each have 3 wishes from it. His manner was so impressive that his hearers were conscious that their light laughter jarred somewhat. Well, why don't you have 3, sir? Said Hubert White clearly. The soldier regarded him in the way that middle age is wont to regard presumptuous youth. He gave him that old man stare. I have, he said quietly, and his blotched face whitened. And did you really have 3 wishes granted? Asked Mrs. White. I did, said the Sergeant Major. His glass tapped against his strong teeth. And has anyone else wished? Persisted the old lady. The first man had his 3 wishes, yes, was the reply. I don't know what the first 2 were, but the third was for death. That's how I got the paw. His tones were so grave that a hush fell upon the group. If you've had 3 wishes, it's no good to you now, then, Morris, said the old man at last. What do you keep it for? The soldier shook his head. Fancy, I suppose, he said slowly. I did have some idea of selling it, but I don't think I will. It has caused enough mischief already. Besides, people won't buy. They think it's a fairy tale, some of them, and those who think anything of it would want to try it first and pay me afterwards. If you could have another 3 wishes, said the old man, eyeing him keenly, would you have them? That is a good question. That's a good way to find out if this thing has fucked you or not. I don't know, said the other. I don't know. He took the paw, dangling it between his forefinger and thumb. Suddenly, threw it upon the fire. White, with a slight cry, stooped down and snatched it off. Better let it burn, said the soldier solemnly. He could do a better job of warning them about this. If you don't want it, Morris, give it to me. I won't, said his friend doggedly. I threw it on the fire. If you keep it, don't blame me for what happens next. Hitch it on the fire again like a sensible man. The other shook his head and examined the new possession closely. How do you do it? He inquired. I love how he answers. You're so annoyed, then don't tell him. But then God knows what they would do if they got really angry at him. It was just like, tell me. Who knows? Hold it up in your right hand and wish aloud, said the Sergeant Major. I warn you of the consequence. Sounds like the Arabian Nights, said Mrs. White, as she rose and began to set supper. Don't you think you might wish for 4 pairs of hands for me? Her husband drew the talisman from her pocket, and then all 3 burst into laughter as the Sergeant Major, with a look of alarm on his face, caught him by the arm. Oh. If you must wish, he said gruffly, wish for something sensible. Mr. White dropped it back in his pocket, and placing chairs, motioned his friend to the table. In the business of supper, the talisman was partly forgotten, and afterwards the three sat listening in an enthralled fashion to a second instalment of the soldier's adventures in India. If the tale about the monkey's paw is not more truthful than those tales he's been telling us, said Herbert as the door closed behind their guest, in the time for him to catch the last train, we shan't make much out of it. Oh, I need a drink of water. Did you give him anything for it, father? Inquired Mrs. White, regarding her husband closely. A trifle, he said, colouring slightly. He didn't want it, but I made him take it, and he pressed me again to throw it away. Likely, said Herbert with pretend horror. Why, we're going to be rich and famous and happy. Wish to be an emperor, father, to begin with. Then you can be henpecked. Then you can't be henpecked. He darted round the table, pursued by the malignant Mrs. White, armed with the anti-mask. What? I understand. Mr. White took the paw from his pocket and eyed it dubiously. I don't know what to wish for, and that's a fact, he said. It seems to me I've got all I want. If only you cleared the house, you'd be quite happy, wouldn't you? Said Herbert, his hand on his shoulder. Well, wish for £200 then. That'll just do it. His father smiled. His father smiled shamefacedly at his own credulity, held up the talisman, as his son, with solemn face, somewhat marred by a wink at his mother, sat down at the piano and struck an impressive few chords. I wish for £200, said the old man distinctly. A fine crash came from the piano, greeted his words, interrupted by a shuddering cry from the old man. His wife and son ran towards him. It moved! He cried, with a glance of disgust at the object that lay on the floor. As I wished, it twisted in my hand like a snake. Well, I don't see the money, said his son as he picked up and placed it on the table, and I bet we never shall. Must have been your fancy, father, said his wife, regarding him anxiously. He shook his head. Never mind, though. There's no harm done. It gave me a shock all the same. They sat down by the fire again, and while the two men finished their pipes, outside the wind was higher than ever, and the old man started nervously at the sound of the door banging upstairs. A silence unusual and depressing settled upon the three. What was I up to? Oh, I've lost my place. Which lasted until the old couple rose to retire for the night. I expect you'll find the cash tied up in a big bang in the middle of your bed, said Herbert, as he bade goodnight to them, and something horrible squatting up on the top of the wardrobe, watching you as you pocket your ill-gotten gains. Hubert! He sat alone in the darkness, gazing at the dying fire, and seeing faces in it. The last face was so horrible and so simian that he gazed in amazement that it got so vivid With an uneasy laugh, he fell on the table for a glass containing a little water to throw over it. His hand grasped the monkey's paw, and with a shiver he wiped his hand on his coat and went to bed. Spooky! In the brightness of the wintry sun the next morning, as it streamed over the breakfast table, he laughed at his fears. There was an air of Prozac wholesomeness about the room, which it had lacked the previous night, and the dirty, shriveled little paw was pitched on the sideboard with carelessness which bespoke no great belief in its virtues. I suppose all old soldiers are the same. We know. They'd see a sheep in a field, and next day they'd say they fought a dragon. Exordium references. Wah, 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 wah. The idea of listening to such nonsense. How could wishes be granted these days? And if they could, how could £200 hurt you, father? Might drop on his head from the sky, said the frivolous Hubert. Morris said things happened so naturally, said his father, that you might, if you so wished it, attribute it to coincidence. Well, don't break into the money before I get back, Hubert. I kind of like Hubert. He was just taking the piss the entire time. Just like, you got this. I'm afraid it'll turn you into a mean, avarice man, and we'll have to disown you. His mother laughed and followed him to the door, watched him down the road, and returned to the breakfast table. Was all very happy at the expense of her husband's credulity, of all which did not prevent her from scurrying to the door at the postman's knock, nor prevent her from referring somewhat to retired Sergeant Major of bilious habits when she found the post brought a tailor's bill. Ooh. Hubert will have some funny remarks, I expect, when he comes home, she said as they sat at dinner. I dare say, Mr. White, pouring himself some beer, but for all that, the thing moved in my hand, I'll swear to. You thought it did, said the old lady. I say it did, replied the other. There was no thought about it. I had just... What's the matter? His wife made no reply. She was watching the mysterious movements of a man outside, who was peering in an undecided fashion at the house. Appeared to be trying to make his mind up to enter. In mental connection with £200, she noticed the stranger was well dressed and wore a silk hat of glossy newness. 3 times he paused at the gate and then walked on again. The 4th time he stood with his hands upon it, and then sudden resolution flung it open and walked up the path. Miss White, at the same moment, placed her hands behind her, hurriedly unfastening the strings of her apron, put the useful article of apparel behind the cushions on the chair. Well, who are you trying to impress, lady? She brought the stranger, who seemed ill at ease, into the room. He gazed at her furtively and listened in a preoccupied fashion as the old lady apologized for her appearance of the room. Her husband's coat, a garment which he usually reserved for the garden. Then she waited patiently as her sex would permit. Oh, ladies, we are so impatient. We cannot deal with the business. Oh, no. For him to broach business. But he was at first strangely silent. "I was asked to call," he said at last, and stooped to pick up a piece of cotton from his trousers. "I come from Moore and Megan's." The old lady started. "Is anything the matter?" she asked breathlessly. "Has anything happened to Hubert? What is it? What is it?" Her husband interposed. There, mother," he said hastily. "Sit down and don't jump to conclusions. You've not brought us bad news, sir, I'm sure." He eyed the other wistfully. "I'm sorry." "Is he hurt?" demanded the mother wildly. The visitor bowed in assent. "Badly hurt," he said quietly, "but he's not in any pain." "Sorry." "Oh, thank God," the woman clasping her hands. "Thank God for that. Thank..." She broke off suddenly as the sinister meaning of the assurance dawned on her, and she saw the awful confirmation of her fears in the other's perverted face. She caught her breath, turning to her slower-witted husband, laid her trembling hand upon his. There was a long silence. "He was caught in the machinery," said the visitor at length in a low voice. "Caught in the machinery?" Mr. White repeated in a dazed fashion. "Yes." He sat staring blankly out the window, and, taking his wife's hand between his own, pressed it as he had been wont to do in their old courting days nearly 40 years before. "He was the only one left to us," he said, turning gently to the visitor. "It is hard." The other coughed and, rising, slowly walked to the window. "The firm wished for me to convey their serious sympathy with your great loss," he said without looking round. "I beg that you will understand I am only their servant and merely obeying orders." There was no reply. The old woman's face was white, her eyes staring, her breath inaudible. On her husband's face was a look such as his friend the sergeant might have carried into his first action. "I was to say that Moore and Miggins disclaim all responsibility," continued the order. "They admit no liability at all, but in consideration of your son's services, they wish to present you with a certain sum of compensation." Mr. White dropped his wife's hand and, rising to his feet, gazed with a look of horror at his visitor. His dry lips shaped the words. "How much?" £200, was the answer. Unconscious of his wife's shriek, the old man smiled faintly, put out his hands like a sightless man, and dropped a senseless heap to the floor. Wah! "Yeah, fair enough. Oh no, I wish my son dead. Whoop!" That's not good. Like, I knew, like, the whole thing was twisting the wishes, but holy duck. In the huge cemetery, some 2 miles distant, the old people buried their dead and came back to a house steeped in shadow and silence. It was all over so quickly. At first, they could hardly realize it, and remained in a state of expectation, as though something else happened. Something else was to happen. Something else which was to lighten the load too heavy for the old hearts to bear. But the days passed, and expectation gave place to resignation. The hopeless resignation of the old. Sometimes miscalled apathy. Sometimes they hardly exchanged a word. For now they had nothing to talk about, and their days were long and weary. Or long to weariness. It was about a week after the old man, walking suddenly in the night, stretched out his hand and found himself alone. The room was in darkness, and the sound of subdued weeping came from the window. He raised himself in bed and listened. "Come back," he said tenderly. "You will be cold." "It is colder for my son," the old woman, said the old woman, and wept afresh. The sound of her sobs died away on his ears. The bed was warm, and his eyes heavy with sleep. He dozed fitfully, and then slept until a sudden wild cry from his wife awoke him with a start. "The paw!" she cried wildly. "The monkey's paw!" He started in alarm. Where is it? What's the matter?" She came stumbling across the room towards him. "I want it," she said quietly. "You've not destroyed it?" It's in the parlour on the bracket," he replied, marvelling. "Why?" She cried and laughed together, bending over, kissed his cheek. "I only just thought of it," she said hysterically. "Why didn't I think of it before? Why didn't you think of it?" Think of what?" he questioned. "The other 2 wishes," she replied rapidly. "We've only had one." Was that not one? Was that not enough?" he demanded fiercely. "No," she cried triumphantly. "We'll have one more. Go down and get it, and wish our boy alive again." The man sat up in bed, flung the bedclothes from his quaking limbs. "Good God, are you mad?" he cried, aghast. "Get it," she panted. "Get it quickly and wish. Oh, my boy, my boy." Her husband struck a match and lit a candle. "Get back to bed," he said unsteadily. "You don't know what you are saying." I know that I need to blow my nose. 1 second, I'm going to mute. Gross cold noises. Do 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 do. I'm sorry, I tried to catch all of them in the mute, but I didn't. "We had our first wish granted," said the old woman. "Why not the second?" "A coincidence," stammered the old man. "Go and get it and wish," cried the wife, quivering with excitement. There's that excitement being used for something that's not quite positive again. And in terms of women a lot. The old man turned and regarded her with his voice, and his voice shook. "He has been dead 10 days, and besides he would not tell you else, but I only recognize him by his clothing. If he was too terrible for you to see then, how now? Bring him back!" cried the old woman, and dragged him towards the door. "Do you think I fear the child I have nursed?" He went down in the darkness and felt his way to the parlour. then on the mantelpiece, the talisman was in its place, and a horrible fear that the unspoken wish might bring his mutilated son before him ere he could escape from the room seized upon him. Why doesn't she do it herself? Probably historical sexism. And he caught his breath as he found that he had lost the direction of the door, his brow cold with sweat. He felt his way round the table, groped along the wall until he found himself in the small passage of the unwholesome thing in his hand. His wife's face seemed to change as he entered the room. It was white and expectant, and his fears seemed to have an unnatural look upon it. He was afraid of her. Wish. It was foolish and wicked. He faltered. Wish. He raised his hand. I wish my son alive again. Sorry. The talisman fell to the floor as he regarded it fearfully. Then he sank, trembling into his chair as the old woman with burning eyes walked to the window and raised the blind. He sat until he was chilling with the cold, glancing occasionally at the figure of the old woman peering through the window. The candle end that had burned below the rim of the china candlestick was throwing pulsating shadows on the ceiling and walls until, with a flicker larger than the rest, it expired. The old man, with an unspeakable sense of relief at the failure of the talisman, crept back to his bed. A minute or two afterwards, the old woman came silently and apathetically beside him. Neither spoke, but lay silently listening to the ticking of the clock. A stair creaked, and a squeaky mouse scurried noisily through the wall. The darkness was oppressive, and after lying for some time, screwing up his courage, he took a box of matches, striking one, went downstairs for a candle. At the foot of the stairs, the match went out. He paused to strike another, and at the same moment, a knock, so quiet and stealthy as to be scarcely audible, sounded on the front door. The matches fell from his hand and spilled into the passage. He stood motionless, his breath suspended until the knock was repeated. Then he turned and fled swiftly back to his room and closed the door behind him. A third knock sounded through the house. Sorry, 1 minute. Wow. Stupid cold. Go away. Back to Spoopy. What was that? Cried the old woman, starting up. Is she a car? Brum brum, starting up. A rat, said the old man in shaking tones. A rat. It passed by me on the stairs. His wife sat up in bed, listening. A loud knock resounded through the house. It's Herbert! She screamed. It's Herbert! She ran to the door, but her husband was there before her, and catching her by the arm, held her tightly. What are you going to do? He whispered hoarsely. It's my boy! It's Herbert! She cried, struggling mechanically. I forgot it was 2 miles away. What are you holding me for? Let go. I must open the door. For God's sake, don't let it in, cried the old man, trembling. You're afraid of your own son, she cried, struggling. Let me go. I'm coming, Herbert. I'm coming. There was another knock and another. The old woman with a sudden wrench, broke free and ran from the door. Ran for the door. I assumed ran for the door. Her husband following to the landing and called after her, appealing as she hurried downstairs. She heard the chain rattle back and the bottom bolt drain slowly and stiffly from the socket. Then the old woman's voice, strained and panting. "The bolt!" she cried loudly. "Come down! I can't reach it!" But her husband was on his hands and knees, groping wildly on the floor in search of the paw. If he could only find it before that thing got in. A perfect fusillade of knocks reverberated the house, and he heard the scraping of a chair as his wife brought it down the passage against the door. He heard the creaking of the bolt as it came slowly back, and at the same moment found the monkey's paw, and frantically breathed his third and last wish. The knocking ceased suddenly, although the echoes of it were still in the house. He heard the chair drawn back, and the door opened. Cold wind rushed up the stairs, and a long, loud wail of disappointment and misery from his wife gave him the courage to run downstairs to her side, and then to the gate beyond. The street lamp flickering opposite shone on a quiet and deserted road. I am actually kind of disappointed she didn't get to open the door. I wanted this story to end in murder. The zombie comes in and murders them all. Instant fear of monkeys. Goring, creepy. Oh, so this is the original monkey paw story. Let me just do. Down to no 3. Yeah. Yeah, that's the original monkey paw story, which is very interesting. It is consequences of your own actions, consequences of your greed kind of thing, but not so much as, like, I don't know if anyone else, but the main thing I've seen Monkey's Paw from has been the Simpsons Halloween special. I don't even remember it that well. I don't know if that's the one where Homer turned his head into a donut and started eating his own head, because he's just very strange like that. But that's the one I remember it from, and there was a lot more wishes and a lot more comeuppance going on. So for them to only have, like, the son dying and then this potential zombie situation that they got out of in the end is quite interesting. Also, I like I said, I expected them to die or something at the end. Rather, they actually kind of got away with it and got to live their own lives again afterwards. It's very, very interesting in that kind of way. I think it's definitely not what I expected. Not as spoopy as one expected it to be. That is it for the day. I hope you enjoyed these spoopy stories. I did. I like the old ones are really hard to read. They get a lot more tongue-tied with them, but there's definitely some language in there that's always really interesting. Like, what was it? There's loads in here that's really cool. That, like, phrases that just aren't used anymore that are really nice. We don't tend to say candles expire as much as we do in thinking. Calling things unwholesome. We use wholesome a lot more nowadays, but definitely not unwholesome. Also the whole excited thing, again, from from ye old time of excited being more of a negative connotation than a positive one when it's used nowadays. Very interesting stuff. I love looking at old language. It's a shame you get the whole as much impatient as sex allows phrases, but hey ho. Language has got a lot better since then. We've gotten a lot better since then. Silver linings, we've grown. Either way, it was very interesting. I had fun. I hope you had fun. This has been Bernie Rose Smith live from the Forbidden Library. I will be streaming next week. I'll be trying to get back into it. Because I'm feeling a bit better. As you've seen with this stream, I'm still not 100%, but I would like to get back into the streaming. I have put a schedule for 3 streams next week, because I really would like to get Alice Mad done before the end of Halloween, which is tomorrow. So I have to finish that game. But I don't think I've got a lot left. So that should be a fairly short stream. And then I will probably play Final Fantasy once more. And then we will be back to our regularly scheduled broadcast of Exordium next Sunday. After that, Sonic comes up next week, so who knows what's going to happen to my schedule after that. I'm excited for it. But, this has been me. What? Oh Jesus, you made me jump. Sagittarius, hey, with the jump scare right at the end of the spooky stream. Thank you for that. Well, I'm glad you had fun. Thank you for the sub. You just came in right at the end. I am unfortunately leaving now, but there will be some clips of this with the stories and stuff later on. But for now, I had fun. I hope you had fun. I will see you tomorrow, maybe. Thank you very much for coming. Bye!